The next session was paralegal dimensions, but due to the paucity of time, we'll be providing you with the links of the virtual field visits to the police and courts in your training manuals. We'll move ahead with the next session, which is on climate change and sustainability, management perspectives in building a climate resilient future. For this, I would like to invite Dr. Prakash Rao, sir. Dr. Prakash Rao, sir, is the Deputy Director and Head of Energy and Environmental Department at Symbiosis Institute of International Business, and he is also Head of Center for Climate Change and Sustainability at the Symbiosis International Deemed University, Pune. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Mic is here. Can I open the... Yeah. Okay, so good afternoon, and on a Saturday afternoon, talking about climate change. I think you've gone through enough during the day with Dr. Gurpur telling you so many things, and I think this has been one of those sessions where many of you all are probably going to get some idea from the backgrounds that you all come from. Yeah, I was just seeing that posted out here about what your backgrounds are. So some of you are from the academics, some of you are coming, your students, there are some NGOs here. So it's a nice mix of people. I'm not sure there are people from the industry here. So unlikely, unless I'm wrong, because what I'm going to talk about doesn't just concern an issue that I think is so familiar to everybody. And that issue what we are talking about is climate change. Yeah. Quite simply, climate change as a definition, I am sure everybody would say that it is changing climate, yeah, as simple as it, but it is not as simple as you think really. It is much more complex than what we see a changing climate today. So what I am going to show you, I mean obviously this is not going to be done in a matter of a half an hour or so, but I will try and just use some areas about what we as individuals need to know about climate change. And obviously it is not about knowing the weather, which we all know about it. So I don't want to repeat things which you probably already are aware of, but I'll try to take you through something which helps you to understand what are the dimensions of climate change that you probably need to look at, you know, when you are starting to look at it as an academician, or if you are starting to look at it as a student and eventually going on to a profession, could be a lawyer, it could be a technology person, you could get into a corporate role, or you could become a researcher. All of it today encompasses this very word called climate change. So I am just going to take you through that very quickly, and I will try and see how much I can cover very quickly for you all to do that. So this whole idea of climate change talks about 3 or 4 words, and you see that word written out there on that slide. It is about impacts, mitigation and adaptation. The first point that you need to understand is what is the impact of climate change on our lives. At this point itself I am going to ask you a quick question. How many of you all feel the impact of climate change, in what way? Can anybody tell me that? It's a question to you all. Does it affect us at all? If so, how? That's my question. Anyone?
Walking like on the road and then the pollution hits on your face.
Okay, what else? Yes?
Sir, in the north part of the country, the heat waves have become more intense in the recent years.
Okay, so heat wave. Okay, fair enough. Yes, quickly. If you have...
So the changing temperature which is happening across the world.
Okay, so rise in temperature, in a sense it's linked to the heat wave, yeah, they're about similar. Anybody else who could think of something different? Yeah.
Sir, it's abnormal behavior of seasonal cycles which we are witnessing now.
Perfectly fine. There is something wrong with the weather around us, yeah. You talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents, they'll tell you much more about it, saying that no, this is not what the weather was, yeah. So there's something abnormal. Yeah.
So for example, right now in Kashmir, since for the first time there has been no snow up till now.
Absolutely.
It's very delayed.
Media report just 3 days back, you know, it's been talked about the fact that Kashmir has had hardly any snowfall, and just think about it, it's not about just talking about the weather. Do you know what has happened in Kashmir because of that lack of snowfall? Okay, but something more significant that has happened there. You know, after all, winter snowfall is huge tourism revenue for people who live there. Yeah, the tourism is slashed by 50%. People don't want to go there because there's no snowfall. So now you see there is a business angle coming into it, that people are losing businesses because of it. So I'm just trying to link it that it's just not a weather issue, it's much more beyond. Okay, I've got some feelers about what you feel climate impacts are. So I'm going to just tell you, this is a statement which was written way back in 2007. You know, we are talking 16 years back. Climate change is not just an environmental issue. It's becoming one of the defining facts of economic development in the 21st century. It will shape investment, technology deployment, and human development around the world. So we humans are getting affected by it, and we are not sure where it is going to end. Even I do not know. But the way things are happening in the next 10-15 years is going to be very critical. It's also going to tell us about how you need to look at your technology for the future. And I'll just come to that quickly, saying how come technology is involved in all this. And it's also about investments. So that's getting into the financial angle. I will not get into that at this point, but I'm just going to look at it from 2 or 3 angles about why technology plays such an important role in terms of addressing this issue of climate change. So I think this point which I was saying, some of you pointed out here, is climate change real? The answer is India faced possibly its hottest February in 112 years. And there is also some reports which are trying to say that 2024 may be the hottest year even compared to 2023. We don't know. So it's not a great sign really. It is not just India alone. So someone mentioned to me northern India had heat waves, temperature rise. So it's not just an India problem. Look at what it says there. Heat waves in Europe have touched extent of temperatures reaching 40 degrees. Yeah? Now 40 degrees for us is nothing, right? You and me will say, hey, what is 40 degrees? It's nothing great. But to a person living in UK and Europe, 40 degrees means intense heat there, and there is a chaotic situation there. So it's a different set of parameters of temperature which are affecting the world. And it's Europe, it's Tunisia, it's about China, it's everywhere around the world. So let's face it, this is a global issue now. So there you are. This is a graph picture which tells you, all that red spots tell you about how the world is currently facing all those heat waves and high temperature. But climate change is not about just heat waves alone. It's not, the word climate change can be attributed to something called global warming, yeah? Another common word that we all use, but that's the more scientific terminology that we use. So I'm going to skip these. Why is this happening? 1 minute on the science of it. Just 1 minute I want to explain is that, you know, the earth that we live on has an atmosphere, yeah? And if you go back to your geography class, I am not going to explain that. There are layers of atmospheric layers above the earth going right up into the space. There are different layers of it. Now around this layer there are something called greenhouse gases. Yeah? There are a few greenhouse gases which are existing in the earth's atmosphere. That's the science which tells us that these gases always existed. Now what has happened in the last 200 years is something that has, I don't think this is visible. In the last 200 years, something went wrong in our Earth's atmosphere. These gases have increased to a certain level, causing a certain change in the weather patterns and climate around us. Why? Again a quick question to anybody who can answer this. Why has it gone up in the last 200 years? Anybody can think of a connection? Yeah? Why not 500 years back, but why only over 200 years, over the last 200 years things have suddenly changed?
So because in the 19th century industrial revolution came and carbon emissions increased.
Perfect.
So because of
Perfect.
it greenhouse effect came.
That's my technology angle that I am bringing you, is that over the last 200 years the world started to develop industrially. Okay? Remember, we are not talking India, we are not talking China. Because India and China did not develop industrially in the last 200 years. It's only now that a country like India is growing rapidly. It's now in the last 30-40 years that China is growing rapidly. But prior to that, much of the world in terms of the developed economies grew in those days. And they have reached a level of saturation today where we all sort of aspire to say that we should become a country like Europe. We want to live in a country where the standards of living are very high, the normal aspirations for each one of us. I like to be seen in a city called London. I like to be living in a city like Paris. Why? Because the standards of living are very high there, right? We aspire to see those cities. But remember, it has come at a cost. It has come at a cost of industrialization and greenhouse gases. And today, they say the Indian model should not replicate that. We also have an aspiration to grow as a country. Our economic development is necessary for a country like India, but do we need to repeat that is the question, at the cost of climate change. So, a little graph here which tells you about why the earth was very stable for almost 900 years, and it's only in the last 200 years that you see there is a graph which shoots up at the end of this, which is going up. What does it tell you? Is that the temperatures are going up in the next 100 years or so, and we just don't know where it's going to end really. As I said, even today scientists are unaware of the fact that where is this temperature rise going to reach? No clue at all. Yes, the world community is taking some action on it, but we are still not having any clear idea about how far are we going to go on that. And what is responsible for it? This is responsible for it. Carbon dioxide concentrations, or what is called carbon emission, again very familiar word for anybody who wants to understand climate change. Yeah. Where are these coming from? Now in this picture itself you get some idea about what this is about, and that is where I am going to now come to my point, is that who is, before I come to that, sorry, before I come to the fact that who is causing this problem, it's important to understand is who is going to cause, and I will come to a question at that point of time. It's important to understand that climate is affecting us in many ways. One, it's affecting our forests, it's affecting our water resources, it's affecting our health. So, quick question again, as normal citizens, how do you think climate affects our health? Any 3 or 4 pointers to it? Human health. Yeah. Because we said climate change is real, we are feeling it, do we have a problem with the health and climate change?
Sir, climate change affects human health in multifarious ways.
Yeah.
Right now in Delhi there is dense fog because of heightened emissions of carbon dioxide in the industries there and dust particles, so it causes respiratory problems. Then there are heat waves that is taking lives of many workers who are working outdoors, and then dietary habits are becoming worse because of climate change these days.
How do you correct that?
Sir, because nowadays as temperatures are soaring enormously high, we have to come up with some newer sorts of technologies of growing crops genetically, and for that we are experimenting using fertilizers and all, and some way that is causing harm to our health because we are not intaking the food that is naturally produced, and in some way climate change contributes to it as well.
Okay. Any other direct correct to it? So you mentioned the fact that there is a lot of heat waves, so which means obviously I am suffering because of an intense temperature. Fine, fair enough, very obvious correlation. Any other factor which you think is a direct link to human health? It's very obvious, it's all around us. I don't want people who should have been affected by it, but it's an obvious fact. Would you think about it?
The chlorofluorocarbons that are all around us all the time
Yeah.
because of the technology
Okay.
also affecting our health.
In what way? Just.
I mean, not only respiratory and dietary, but I think generally also our lots of the fact that the atmosphere and the environment
Itself
is changing.
Okay.
Our right from our sleep patterns to our mental health state to various other aspects
Okay,
are
fair
affecting us.
Let me give you one clear example. Oh yes, yes, please go on, quickly.
Adding on to what Mama said.
Yeah.
Connected chlorocarbons. So since we have the emissions, a lot of ultraviolet rays do not go back into the atmosphere. So they are reflected back onto the earth, and they end up causing skin diseases like skin cancer.
Fair enough. Perfect. So that's one example about how ultraviolet radiations are likely to create problems for your skin. That's one very good point.
Sir, also the less age expectancy which is is shown in humans. Also like the changing dietary patterns which is also evident. Basically non-vegetarian foods according to the study contributed to like 15% of the climate change, and people are still very much like having non-veg foods, and also like the genetic materials and the breeding habits of animals and then consuming it. That is also a very huge problem which is we are facing. And also not only climate change is impacting us humans, but is also impacting us wildlife. Like for example, scientists predicted that by 2050 polar bears will get extinct in Arctic circles, and like polar bear will get extinct, and also the king penguins and all. So
Okay, like so that's a wildlife related.
Exactly, sir.
Take a look at the human health aspect is because, yes, go on.
Human susceptibilities towards different diseases is increased.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I was actually looking for, susceptibility towards diseases, yeah, malaria, chikungunya, dengue, all familiar words to us, yes. That's why I said I hope none of us have got it. But today increasingly climate is a factor causing the spread of these vector-borne diseases. Direct relationship with human health. There are places in this country which did not have malaria, but are having it today, only because of the shift in temperature that's happening around it. Yeah. Ladakh, wonderful place to visit. Never had a single instance of malaria for many, many years. Today there is malaria out there in Ladakh. Why? Because of that vector-borne disease which is hit there, because temperatures there have gone up, making it conducive for those kind of organisms to survive there. Extreme cold places. So you can actually see the shifting aspects of how human health is also likely to be affected. So you mentioned wildlife, certainly biodiversity, critical impacts. Now whether it's a polar bear or whether it is a crop or the staple food that we all eat today, wheat and rice, these are in trouble today. The yields of these plants are also going down because of climate related factors, because after all plants grow in a certain temperature and rainfall condition, and if they are not provided that, your yields are down. So India's economic productivity is also a concern today. So you can see how it is not just a matter of a weather, it's a matter of problems related to your economy itself. Okay, so I'm come back to my session. I think you heard sufficiently a very detailed understanding from Claude Alvarez. He is one of the most well recognized environmental advocates of environmental issues in India. So you heard him actually, and as he said, there are a lot of issues that we could connect very quickly in terms of what he said. The issue that we were just talking about, snowfall in Kashmir, he started with that and went on to a few things. What I will do is probably take a few minutes more. I won't take too much time. There is my colleague Dr. Danarkar also waiting. So I will touch upon one fundamental problem. Who's causing this issue of climate change? Yeah. So, a question here for you all. You saw the impacts in different ways, but now my question is, who's causing it? Any answers? Yeah? Yeah, you can speak. I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it starts out from us ourselves. You know, sometimes we get to do things like maybe I at this speed, I drop positive bar. It will not matter because it's something small. But the way we are in the room, if each one of us does the same thing, the effect that it produces is quite big. And at the end of the day,
hello, yeah.
It's equivalent to the same effect as probably what a big company does in terms of polluting the environment.
Okay, so that's one point. Anybody else as to the reason why all this is happening? Yeah, quickly.
Basically, climate change is really, but it took longer time. When we consider human influence, there are many activities, burning of fossil fuels, many other activities. We are accelerating the rate at which these emissions are there, and that is why we are accelerating the climate change also.
Okay, so you mentioned one point called fossil fuels. Okay, where do you think this comes from? If I am going to go deeper into it, you said fossil fuels is the reason for climate change. So, any thoughts on where this comes from? Yeah, because it's a problem you and me are facing, right? So, it's important to understand what the cause is. And it's like a doctor. If you fall sick, the doctor tries to understand what is the cause of your problem and tries to give you a solution. So, I am trying to connect the same thing here and trying to look at the cause of this problem so that I can provide a solution to it. Let's look at the current. Surely it must be happening because of certain reasons, right? So he mentioned that some of us are responsible, but are we the only people responsible? Is there something else causing it?
So our pattern of consumption of energy is basically still dependent on conventional traditional fossil fuels, and those we get from the their reservoirs which we have in the earth's interior itself. And economy is around it. So though the alternative sources nowadays we are talking about, but it's in a gap between available technology and the existing petroleum resources which we are using. So that's why I think
fair enough. Let me expand and tell you where the potential sources of this problem really come from. So I'll touch upon your point of fossil fuel. You used a word called energy, and you used about how we are as people are also responsible for. So what it says here, I hope you can read it, is the sources of emissions today largely come from the use of fossil fuels. Point number 1 talks about the rapid rise of what is called coal-fired power plants. Yeah, coal is a fossil fuel, one of the cheapest source of fuels that the world has seen for the last 100 years. Today, if I am talking to you, if you all are using your laptops and mobile phones today, right now, it's because you are getting that power from a coal-based source. I can confidently say that what you are getting it is from a coal-based source, which means as we sit here, I am contributing to a carbon emission. Yeah, so that's one. That power plant which is somewhere in this country is causing this problem, releasing tons of carbon dioxide emission into the atmosphere and causing a problem of climate, not here but somewhere in the world. So therefore, the problem of climate change is not as easy as we think. For all you know, this may be coming from a power plant in the United States and causing a problem here in India. Look at the complexity of the problem that I am dealing with, is that somebody is creating a problem and a few thousand kilometers away I am facing the brunt of that problem. Now this is a perfect climate justice and law issue, is that how do I deal with this? If somebody pollutes the atmosphere somewhere else, and I am sure you might have read it as law students, some of you might have gone through this, and the impact of it is being felt in India. How do I deal with it? Yeah. So, the point number 1 that we need to also understand is identify where these sources of emissions are coming, power plant. The second point is what he said, increasing use of energy everywhere, lifestyles and consumption. We live in a consumption oriented world today. Now, you go back in time to about 30 years back, maybe your parents or your grandparents, ask them what was their requirement of energy. Maybe post this event you could do that. What would be their reaction? They would probably say that we used electricity or energy for fans, maybe air conditioners, because today ACs are fairly common, not so much about 30 years back or 40 years back, maybe the odd house might have had an AC, primarily for lights and for your fans. But today the usage of energy has gone much beyond it. All the gadgets that we have here with us. What does it mean? That my requirement of energy is going up, my consumption of energy is going up. Just think of a situation where the energy is not available to you to power your phones and mobiles. As current generation, life would come to a standstill. I can't even survive, because digitalization has become part of our life today. But it wasn't so then. That was primarily because my consumption was not so high. Today, because the demand for energy is growing tremendously, there are more power plants coming, more emissions happening, which is why you are seeing the problem of climate increasing tremendously because of lifestyle and consumption issues. The third parameter is transport or mobility. We have become more mobile today compared to what we were 20-30 years back, whether it is city based transport or whether it is air travel, much more frequent than, the odd person used to travel 20-30 years back within the country or abroad. Today it has become very common, because of fares, it's cheaper, more frequent flights. I'd rather fly somewhere and quickly get back, again a source of emissions. So, there are different sources from where this carbon emissions are coming tremendously, causing a major concern, and that is where the issue is one in terms of the causal areas of climate change. Now, there is another angle which I just want to highlight from. Look at what it says in the second part. Is this concept of emissions equally distributed across this planet of ours? The answer is no. Why? Because it is only a handful of countries which are causing this problem. Now, geographically also there is an issue that we are talking about. So, here you are. It is only about 25 to 30 nations which are responsible for 85% of the total emissions of this entire world. Which are those countries? There is a list out there, which unfortunately includes India as well, because we are a developing nation. So, it is an unequal distribution of the way the world is growing today, and largely it is the developed economy and a handful of developing economies like India, China and maybe a few other countries, which are causing the maximum problem of the earth, of the climate problem on this earth. Countries or continents, and the countries in the African continent or island nations, small island nations, no impact of climate change from there. So, again a question of climate justice, and this has been a point which has been debated for years together as to island nations, which have often asked this question, is that what did we do wrong that we are now in a situation that our country is going down in the being submerged because of somebody else's problem. Constant issues at the United Nations being debated. I will just give you one very interesting example. I do not have the photograph of that island here. There is an island nation in the South Pacific called Tuvalu. Yeah? You might have heard this country called Tuvalu. For those who are aware of this island, it is very interesting. I wish I could have shown you the photograph of that island. That island is very vulnerable to sea level rise because of climate change. It could go off the map of this earth any day. So, what happens? A country does not exist because of climate change today, because of a climate problem. So, what did they do? They thought about this. So what solution do you think happened? You as a country, we live in India, if we have a sea level rise in the coastal region, I might go inside and say, let me go and settle in the inland part of India. What would a country like Tuvalu do? Any guesses? Yeah.
If I am not wrong, then the government of Tuvalu tried to purchase some land in the country of Fiji. If I am not wrong.
Okay, wait. I'll hear if anybody else has a different opinion. Yeah, quickly. Floating houses. Good thought. It's always good to think. Yeah.
They're transferring a lot of their heritage and culture online. I had seen a documentary released recently where the head of state addressed the UN General Assembly from the sea basically to highlight the issue, and they are transferring their culture online, heritage online, to make sure that even if they go underground, they have a government which functions online. Their next generation also which can come in is aware of their culture, and some of them are migrating as a practical solution. Some of them are migrating to Australia, New Zealand. They are having some arrangements. That's what I.
Okay, I'll hold on to your answer because I got two more very quick. Yeah, I think you also had a point. Very quickly.
Relocation of Indonesia's capital Jakarta to Nusantara because of the sinking.
No, we're looking at Tuvalu as the specifically. This is a vulnerable island. Yes, if you have a quick point, and then I'll come to the answer.
I won't say it as a permanent solution, but I think even a country like Singapore faced this problem, and I think, I'm not sure, but they artificially extended the land by building more land. Although that's not a permanent solution, but on a temporary basis,
okay,
it could
fine,
happen.
fair enough. There are thoughts that are coming in. Yes, I think I'll take the last point because we'll need to wind up quickly.
Not a point exactly, but I want to know how is this even fair for a country to allocate so much of its resources trying to find a new land or trying to relocate themselves. Instead, I mean, they could get some legal remedy from the international forums to stop the sea level rises or something like that. I don't feel it's fair to the country to do so.
It is. It's certainly not going under. You will take care of our citizens. The New Zealand government actually said yes, we will get to it. We will eventually come into play and take care of all your citizens on our country. Yeah, as of now. So there is, I believe, I do not know what is the state of that bilateral agreement today, but this is exactly what they are trying to do. But that's because Tuvalu was able to do it with New Zealand. Other countries are not fortunate enough. You know, even Maldives, much in the news today, or rather in recent days, is facing a similar crisis. And some years back, Maldives was also talking about what happens if my country goes under, because these are all very low-lying nations. Exactly. Yeah, they did that. The Maldivian president, I think, did that underwater conference some years back to highlight how serious my problem is. So there are ways in which countries are trying to throw or provide a problem, but that's a vulnerability issue of certain island nations. But for developed economies, the problem is different, because it's, as he said, it's unfair to a certain set of countries, because there are certain set of countries which are contributing to 85% of the world's emissions. Many of them are developed nations, and of course India therefore needs to take proactive stance, because we will soon be branded as one of those countries which is also got high emissions, and therefore what are you doing about it? We could be in that situation in the next 10 years again. So although India accounts for just 3-4% of the global emissions, but that 3-4%, if I translate into total CO2 emissions, is tremendous amount of emissions. With the pace at which our economic development is growing today, Claude Alvarez was talking about development when he was talking about how governments today are actually pushing for growth. Nothing wrong in it, because we are looking at a growth for increasing our standard of living, but should it come at the cost of all the issues that he raised, or should it come at the cost of a problem of climate change? That's the question that we as a country need to answer. The government needs to answer from that perspective. I will sort of rush you through this. So a slide which is a little complicated, but I will reduce it in a minute, saying that for the past 100 years, if you notice that extreme left slide, It talks about we living in a coal-based economy for almost 100 years. Times have changed now. So what we are getting now is the shift that is taking place in terms of our energy profile. Because we feel that our energy consumption is high from a fossil fuel based source, can we shift now? What is the alternative? Some of that alternatives is also well known to us, is that we all want to now move into what is called a renewable energy source. You know, on top of this building, Dr. Gurpur was talking about solar panels being out there. Certainly that is an alternative. But is that enough? No. Obviously that is one solution that we are talking about, which is trying to look at a variety of alternate sources. But all of that can come only if the entire world starts to think in that manner. So we are not sure whether the entire world is thinking, because this is a problem. While India might do it, what about the rest of the world? We have no idea what they are going to do. So the transition that we are talking about is uncertain today. Given the state at which this complex issue is being debated at the world level, it is not going to be easy to see how the world will eventually transform into in some years' time. So while India has its own plan, I will just show you one slide of what we have, but it is also important to see what the rest of the players are doing here. So I will just skip this. So there are solutions which I would probably put out here. Assuming that this is a little technical, which says there is 1 gigaton of carbon emissions that are being emitted every year, what are the possible solutions that are available for us? So one, shifting to what is called natural gas. Now many of you all who live in Pune, I assume everybody is in Pune. In your own homes, we use either an LPG cylinder or we get what is called piped gas in our homes. Yeah? How many of you all get piped gas in your homes? Okay, a few of us have got, and a few of us got LPG cylinders in home. So I don't need to change that cylinder, I just have that piped gas. That's piped natural gas by an agency called MNGL, Maharashtra Natural Gas Limited. Yeah. So natural gas is coming from a certain source which is supposedly less carbon emission compared to the existing source that we are talking about in terms of LPG. But again, there are issues that it is not going to happen so fast. So some of us have it, some of us don't have it. So there are such technologies which are coming in play. Now this is an interesting solution, talks about nuclear energy. Yeah. Now from a general human or citizen's perspective, what is your feel on this whole idea about this word called nuclear energy? You think it's a good thing or not a great thing for us?
Inevitable.
It's inevitable?
So recently there was a news that researchers have developed the first nuclear powered mobile phone battery.
Okay.
Which will last 50 years.
Nuclear powered mobile phone.
China, yeah.
I don't know, I have not heard about it, but anyway.
Day before yesterday.
Many of you all might know that India produces nuclear power. Yeah, we have several nuclear power plants in India today. There are about 8 or 9 of them, and there are 1 or 2 more coming up in this country. There are many of them globally. Is it something which is, in your mind as a citizen, something risky or something that we should not get into? How many of you all have any opinion on it? Yeah.
There comes role of technology, because we have witnessed some serious disasters or accidents.
Yes.
Chernobyl, Fukushima, 3 Miles Island,
several of them. True.
And many more. So if we deal with nuclear energy, we should be ensured that there will be no accidents.
Safety safeguards.
Yeah, safeguards will be there, and haphazardly that will not install. Like we are now, everybody is talking about the deadlines. Within a 2 years project should be there. Installation hua nahi ki we just want an output from it. So if we have all the safety related things are done, still then also the waste material which comes from a nuclear power plant is a big challenge to deal with, because already the countries which are using nuclear energy, they are not able to deal with that waste 100%. So that is again a issue.
So nuclear energy is a debatable issue globally, yeah. But just to give you another perspective, a country like France today runs its entire power, or rather 80% of its power from nuclear, yeah. Many of us don't know this fact. And nearly 75%, 75 to 80% of France runs on nuclear power. France was one of the original 5 big countries, you know, who had nuclear power in them. They continue to do so. Other countries have probably reduced, but France hasn't done so, yeah, with all the safeguards. So they do cite that the better examples. So there is an option, but it's always going to be a challenge about how this should happen. Of course, renewable energy is a major push because it is the cleanest form of your solution that can happen. Whether it is a solar, whether it's a wind, or whether it is a biomass based energy, or any other form of energy, cleanest possible source in which you could actually address the carbon emission problem. There are issues there as well, which I don't think I'll get into at this point of time. But so yes, today the entire country or the world is trying to push through this. Why do you think we are all talking about pushing ourselves into putting solar panels, or you know, this is one of the reasons. It's the easiest and probably the safest bet for reducing our problem of climate change really. I'll clip this one. Mass transportation. Metros are coming up in our cities, yeah. It's probably 10 years late in Pune, but at least a dozen cities in India have it today, yeah. And the metro systems are so well established overseas that it actually provides a viable means of transport rather than use your vehicles here. Yeah. So we have still not reached that situation where mass rapid transportation can reduce fundamentally your problem of climate change. So we are looking at a mix of solutions that are likely to come. There cannot be a single solution that is likely to solve your climate problem. It has to come from a variety of approaches where you need to look at buildings. The way your buildings are being designed today have to be seen in that context. You have probably heard the word green building, right? You might have heard this term called green building. So what is it that makes it green? It's because it's more energy efficient. It's because it uses better quality air conditioners. Maybe it's a nice exercise for each one of y'all. Wherever y'all are, whichever building you operate from, whichever office you operate from, go and look around whether you have these kind of gadgets which are energy efficient in your building. I mean, that itself will give you an answer whether my building is at least halfway into that phase of green building or not. Look at your ACs, look at your fans, look at the way the building's water is being utilized, and you will get your answers there. Yeah. So maybe as a future thought, look at that answer. Low energy appliances. So he mentioned a nuclear powered mobile phone. Now some experiments have happened about even using mobiles through solar energy as well. Yeah, I don't know what happened, whether it's been successful or not, but again these are options that could be thought about. And of course finally doing things differently. What does it mean? Exactly the point that he was coming to, saying that we are responsible as human beings. Yeah. So can I think differently in the way I live my life, whether it's in my house, or whether it's my office, or whether it's in the way I use my energy on a daily basis? Can we give a thought? So energy is nothing technical. Energy is not an engineering term. It's you and me. It's daily life issue. It's an issue of for each one of us to think that I am here consuming energy for a certain purpose, and therefore can I find a way in which I can optimize the use of my energy on a daily basis. Whether it's your mobile phone or your laptop, or whether it's about traveling from one location to another. I came from Hinjawadi today to this place. Yeah. Now, of course, I felt a little bad that yes, I could have probably done this online as well, but nevertheless, it's always nice to have a discussion here. But what Claude Alvarez did was perfect. Yeah, sitting in Goa, he communicated to you all. So instead of taking a train or a flight and coming here, he said he conveyed what he wanted to you very quickly. So he's got his savings done through what he did. But this is what I am trying to say, is that that last point is doing things differently. If we can start thinking about it, I think the world will be a much better place to live in the future. Of course, I do not know how the world will change in the future, but whatever you all are doing, whether you are going to become lawyers, whether you are going to become or working in a corporate office, if you are going to be academicians, think about the environment and climate as one of your focus areas. As what Mr. Claude Alvarez very rightly said, is that environment is everybody's business. I mean, we don't leave it to the environmentalists, but it's for us, because I think fundamentally he started by saying one very important fact, is that we see the humans at the center of everything and see the environment around us. Rather, I would say, look at the environment as a center and see the humans as part of it. I think then you will probably be able to see how we can live in a better way. So I am going to stop here. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking us through various aspects of development and its ramifications on climate change. We indeed believe that the possible solutions highlighted by you will act as an enabler for change. Any questions?